That's a good place. So, just to kind of recap on where we've been, we started talking very early on this morning about imports and exports, rather big numbers. We started to talk more specifically about the information that people like Frost and Sullivan and others have talked to us about with regard to trends and activities. We heard about the regulations, we heard about RTA's view about periodic testing. So in the afternoon we started to come down to some rather more focused aspects to do with technologies. And indeed now we're going to talk and hear from Brent Melvin, who's the General Manager of the Supply Chain Division of Massar Solutions, who's going to talk about, I guess, supply chain activities. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. So, if I may just quick introduction to Massar Solutions. We are largely a fleet leasing and maintenance company. We also have a supply chain division, so we're very much involved in automotive at large, but more specifically my division is supply chain. Do I have a clicker? There we go. All right, thank you. So what I want to talk about is supply chain, but more specifically from a local perspective. So you've all attended talks where everybody talks about supply chain from point of origin to point of final consumption. What I'm looking at is optimizing the supply chain. The background to this really is, given market conditions, we're in a bit of a slowdown economically, everybody's tightening the belt. What we're trying to achieve is naturally the ability to cost cut. As organizations, it's about what your end delivered cost is. Now through the supply chain, obviously costs are added on as your processes grow and evolve and your distribution centers are established and your networks are established. So what I'm looking at is two particular elements of how we can reduce costs, and obviously I'm looking at it from a UAE point of view, because for me this is an end market. So the supply chain obviously commences with the supplier, raw material processing, through to production, manufacturing, wholesale, retail, and naturally onto transportation. So as I mentioned, we're really looking at warehouse and transport optimization strategies and why these are important, particularly in this current climate. So the background, historically core responsibility for storage of goods remains the warehouse function, and the warehouse function obviously is layered with costs. That's people, process, racking, the ability to stock inventory. But what we've also seen is trends, and these trends have been evolving over the last number of years: lean logistics, warehouse optimization, and so forth. So there's best practice that's coming into the warehouse environment. One of those key areas is inventory management, and this is really a key area of what I want to talk about. So through inventory management, you have your visibility naturally. You want to know how your pick-pack operations are working, if you've got value-added service operations, who's co-packing, who's bundling for you, what kind of kitting is taking place at the warehouse, and so forth. Naturally, key elements of that: replenishment, stock management, dock management. So very core functions of the warehouse operation. I'm presuming everybody here is a spare parts manager, operator, or somebody that has parts, even vehicles in the supply chain. If not, sorry, it might be a bit dull. Maybe you'll pick up a few tips. So warehouse operations are key to inventory management. Demand planning is essential. Obviously, if you're not demand planning, it means you're overstocking. If you're not managing the right type of stock, you're putting costs into the marketplace. And we're looking to reduce costs, and we're looking for speed to market, because these are customer elements. So challenges obviously is, how do we increase productivity? How do you maintain inventory accuracy? How do you reduce costs? What kind of safety stock should you have in your warehouse, and what do you do to manage stock outs? Your demand planning, as I mentioned, obviously taking into account seasonal fluctuations, which are very key, particularly in markets like the Middle East, and what kind of lead times. So how long does it take to get different types of parts from suppliers to your inventory? So the idea of optimization is looking at a couple of focused areas. The first is space optimization. So And no matter what you do, lease space is a lot of money. So while you're paying for leases, you may as well make use of it, or reduce the lease costs and reduce the warehouse size. Inventory planning and optimization naturally is very, very key. And what I mean about inventory planning and optimization is utilizing software or utilizing parties like Massar to look at your inventory. And what we do is we do an analysis of your throughput. So what are customers ordering? What is their frequency of the order? What are those fast-moving items versus slow-moving items? How are they arranged in a warehouse? What accessibility do you have from a pick operation so that you're not touching the same item multiple times in a pick process? So I don't know if any of this rings true with any of you or if you're kind of away from the warehouse. But when you start looking at these little elements, these are cost points. And every time you can reduce any of these cost points, what you're doing is taking costs out of your product. So just by a basic show of hands, who manages inventory based on these basic principles? Anybody here? Excellent. So those are obviously people with competitive edge. I mean, that's really what you're ultimately trying to achieve. I talk about load planning as well, and I'll come back to the transport element, because for me, load planning is a key part of how you get your product to market. This is a small market, so in many respects, it's not a difficult market to service. However, when I get into transport, you'll see there are a couple of nitty points that are problematic here. So under a transport perspective, what we look at firstly is outsourced versus owned. And this is a debate, no doubt, that rages in your businesses with your supply chain managers, your transport managers. It's one that we're very hot on. We obviously look at the outsourced approach, and we look at that for two reasons. One is vehicles on your balance sheet are a cost to company. So use your money based on your business, on your stock, your management, your product. In our case, my business is transport, so we use our money for transport. Now that can be done in a number of ways. It can be done through consolidating a number of your products together. Very often you're going to very similar suppliers or similar customers. It can be done through optimizing route performance. It can be done through load planning. It's really how you take your delivery requirements and convert it into a seamless and effective approach. Now there's two things here that obviously stand true. Reduced costs doesn't always imply improved customer service. So there has to be a balancing game by the same token. It's very easy to say we will go and reduce your costs and cut out all of the unnecessary elements, lean logistics, but if you're not providing a service to your customer, you may as well not bother, because you've actually lost your edge in any event. So there is that fine balance. Don't let your supply chain manager come and tell you that it's all cost, and we've got the solution, boss. Yeah? Things that we look at is number and size of vehicles. And obviously this is true to any market and will differ from market to market. So number of vehicles is relevant to how much volume you're delivering on a daily basis to your customers. The size of the vehicles depends on the distance and the accessibility to city limits. So in many respects, you cannot bring big trucks into city limits for obvious reasons, congestion, there are road bans, limitations to size and so forth. So we tend to have a blend of vehicles. We look at big vehicles for doing the intercity line hauls. We look at big vehicles for cross-border operations, and naturally smaller vehicles, and they will differ from 5-ton right the way down to 1-ton vehicles based on specific requirements. Then you have to look naturally with the vehicle at your type of product. Is this a tail lift operation? Is this a helper operation? What is the size of your box? What is the size of your product? So how are you reaching your marketplace? Very key, I'm sure, to all of you is visibility of your product. So it's left the warehouse. You want to know it's with your customer effectively, efficiently, on time. It's signed for, received, so that you can convert that into an invoice. And the moment you've got an invoice, you've got billing, and you've got customer satisfaction, assuming all the blocks are pieced together. For us, it's about plan versus actual. So when we look at a delivery process, we'll discuss plan with you. So everybody always has the best possible plans. In reality, they don't always play true, and those can be for many reasons. Sometimes it's traffic congestion, sometimes it's as simple as a customer delay. So I don't know how many times you've experienced arriving at a customer. I'll tell you who's really good at this is Carrefour. Try and deliver to a Carrefour, they'll keep you in queue for 3 hours. it affects your supply chain tremendously. So again, that's cost knocked back to you. However, they're probably the tightest margin of all of your customers. Yeah? So delays at customer locations are a big thing. And then routing and adherence plan obviously is something of a post-mortem review. So daily you look at what did we plan, what have we done, why hasn't it worked, what do we do differently. So these are all part of reviews that should be done. So these are challenges that naturally we face in a transport environment. And then the last thing really is a challenge is working hours. So believe it or not, UAE is conforming in many cases now to working hour limitations. Yeah? Ministry of Labour always says 8-hour working day, 6-day week. Trust me, in distribution, 13 hours are not uncommon. Driver fatigue, other safety issues creep in. So these are very, very key factors. And then you look at your customer timings. You know, how many customers can you effectively reach in a day to maximize your vehicle utilization? So considerations, as I mentioned, fleet quantity, but also capacity. So how much can your particular vehicle or vehicles take, and what is the market reach? In terms of capacity, it's also about where are your distribution centers. Obviously, time traveled is time wasted. So the closer to market, the more effective. However, costs come into play when you look at multiple distribution sites. So there has to be a nice balance between having distribution centers, having consolidation centers, and obviously having the dispatch operations. We spoke about customer locations. In the UAE, we've really only got 5 Emirates, 7 Emirates, but 3 of them are so on top of each other that may as well be one. And it's the case of then having your origin potentially in Dubai. So we see a lot of the operations coming out of Jebel Ali. There are other markets for distribution, DIP, DIC, and all sorts. But is that truly effective? I can tell you now that in one of my operations, we've actually gone to 4 location distribution center, one based in Abu Dhabi, one in Al Ain, one in Ajman, and one in Dubai. Dubai being the biggest market, so obviously that makes sense. And the idea is that we can line haul product overnight into these centers, and then we do distribution from there. So again, it comes back to volume, to throughput, and to size of operation. We spoke about customer availability and service timings. So, consideration to when can you deliver? What is the flexibility of timings? Can you double shift a customer? Many customers will actually receive product in the evenings. We still have, in a lot of our service centers, split shift operations where between 1 and 4 places shut down, but for the balance of the day they're open. So you can deliver to 10 o'clock at night. So it's understanding your network. Number of orders for delivery, time, distance, and of course, vehicle-specific attributes. This is a utility tool that we use to help us with our programming. So what we do, we really bring into account all of the factors that I've mentioned. This allows a customer specific information to be captured. This allows specific vehicle attributes and driver timings to be captured. And this system will then run a series of algorithms that will output a load plan for a day. Now the key to this load plan is it's going to optimize kilometers, it's going to optimize time, and it's going to reach the market through the best vehicle utilization. So a very simple utility, but the cost savings that we've seen so far have been tremendous. I mean, in certain operations, I've seen a reduction of 21% on distribution costs. At the same time, we've seen a significant increase of product on shelf. So that means availability to customers. And that's simply by utilizing smart tools. So this is a route optimization tool. And as I mentioned, minimize kilometers. I think if you don't understand your cost of operation, you don't understand the cost of running a vehicle, you've missed the whole point. You're all in the business of spare parts. Spare parts I include tires and the physical wearable parts, including consumables in the vehicle. So every time you turn on an engine, it's costing money. If you haven't planned a route, if you haven't managed to minimize your route and get the maximum utilization from the vehicle, it's cost. How many of you actually understand your operating cost of your truck? Or is it something that's looked at in terms of diesel, the odd bit of maintenance that's done, and of course your depreciation? because that tends to be what companies here look at. In many cases, don't know the cost of operation. It's essential that you drill down to basic dirhams and fills. And in that understanding, you're going to reach a marketplace competitively. And you're not adding layers of costs, you're now starting to skim costs. I don't know about you, but to me that makes perfect sense. Because that means that delivered product costs less. So either you're going to then employ a strategy of improving yield or being competitive to your marketplace. Yeah. Now, we spoke about visibility, and I'll touch on that again. And I spoke about planned versus actual. What our tool does is it sends a driver out with telemetry on the vehicle. And that telemetry is twofold. One is vehicle-fitted telematic, and the other is something as simple as a smartphone. The smartphone obviously engages a customer on arrival. For the time serviced and spent at the customer location, it will capture a proof of delivery, and it will give me a time when the driver leaves the location. So what it also does is it then gives me operational time between customers, travel time, and it's all planned. So I've set up my parameters. The system will tell me, have we achieved an output, or is this driver taking a chance? So, it's quite often the case that you see drivers parked on the side of the road and you wonder what they're up to. Not always as productive as you'd like to think they should be. So productivity reports then come into play, and this is a great way of measuring drivers, and obviously that can be layered with all sorts of incentives or other mechanisms to improve your driver throughput. So very quickly then, just to conclude, and I'd rather get into some discussions if anybody has any questions, it's really, we're coming from the point of view of Massar utilizing these type of tools, but I think today's session is more about just sharing, about teaching. I'm not selling Massar. What I'm doing is talking about cost initiatives or cost saving opportunities that really you could take into your own businesses, whether this is something you choose to do yourselves and can be done through an array of tools available in the market, or whether this is something that you would reach out to plenty consultants or outsource companies. So obviously, just to close on the selling point is, we do that. So, if you feel this is an opportunity that you want to embark on, chat to me. If it's something that you want to do yourselves, chat to me anyway, because I'll point you in the right direction for tools. The key to this is like anything, tools are available. Implementing the tools are not always as easy as you'd like to think. And having a champion in your business that understands those tools makes all the difference. So it is about capturing the intelligence that they offer, and it's about having the right people to run the operation. So that's it, short and sweet.
That was most interesting and informative. So do you have some questions or points you'd like to ask about? Get a microphone there, please. You're next.
Hi. Do you guys also do warehouse contracting? You take over a warehouse and run the warehouse, or do you only do supply chain?
So we actually do take over 4PL operations on the warehouse. So we would come in and undertake a full handover operation, run the physical operation on your behalf. They can be structured deals. So we have deals at the moment structured with a customer where we do the full lease of the warehouse on a back-to-back basis. We're taking over staffing.
Yeah, because at the moment property and warehousing is becoming so expensive in Dubai, and plus if you look at your staffing and the hassles that you have with your staff, it's becoming a big consideration, saying I must go and rent a bigger warehouse. I was paying 400, I must pay 700 a year now, and I'm sitting with staff that sometimes either they're not the sharpest. My question is, so you guys do have a solution where you can say, look here, take over the warehouse, I don't want to have this nightmare, because if I'm paying 400 or 700,000 a year for a warehouse, I'm paying another 100,000 for staff and some more for equipment and logistics and stuff. You might as well maybe look at that and take over that as an outsourced function.
So the key to what you're describing is organizations like mine will come in with a consolidated approach to operating your warehouse. So bearing in mind I have staffing, I have warehouse management software, we have optimization software, we would look at shift hours, we would also look at warehouses been able to utilize them for other purposes. So it may be that you only need 75% of that operation. So do we have the ability to go commercially to the market and fill the other 25, and you take the cost benefits on a shared basis? So we would look at all sorts of programs that may be bespoke to your operation, may be slightly different from somebody else's. It really depends what you want to achieve from the overall thing. But certainly a 4PL operation is very much in what we do.
Brent, thank you for the presentation. I have seen you mention a lot of tools for cost cutting within the warehouse management. We do have a sophisticated ERP system, and we do measure almost 90% of what you did mention here, and we find it difficult to draw a clear line between customer satisfaction and the outsourcing area. So how you can establish a KPI in that area?
So what we have done is, and this is why I mentioned the point of cost versus customer satisfaction, understanding your customer's parameters is your building blocks. That's your starting point to building this logistics or distribution type operation. Every customer is slightly different. What the tool allows us to do is to capture the nuances of each customer. Now, when you build it up on that basis, it's very easy to tweak and to refine, but you're basically setting for the system certain parameters. Now, let me just say this, that the more complex the parameters, the more difficult the route will ultimately be. Now, so the system will always drive a route, but it adds costs, because time and distance will always equate to cost. So if you compile all this data, we can run some models where we look at different types of operations, we look at customer-specific requirements, we even look at your fleet. So if your fleet is not necessarily perfect for the operation, how do we improve that type of fleet, the mix of fleet? How do we improve the capacity, maybe the tools that you use in the fleet, to come up with the best mix, so that we can reach your customer base, based on time and on demand, and equally on final delivered product. Now, you then have to pull that back into the warehouse operation. So I spoke about demand planning, I spoke about your slow-moving and your fast-moving items, I spoke about your seasonality. So these are all things that have to be assessed. Now, if you've got ERP tools, you know automatically what your demand is. You've got historical data. So really what it is a case of taking that historical data and forecasting. And reduce the slow-moving stock, increase the fast-moving stock. Those are fairly obvious things. At the same time, implementing lean practice in the warehouse, you start looking at how you handle the goods. So where have you put it away on the shelf? Is it accessible faster if it's fast-moving product versus maybe you're using mobile racking for your slow-moving product? So there's a whole lot of considerations that have to be taken into account. The fact that you've got an ERP is great because there's data available. Yep.
Thank you.
Another question.
How do we measure the success of your performance without a back testing?
Okay, the measure of my performance is easy if you understand your current performance. So if you don't know what your current cost and performance is, then we would have to draw a line in the sand and try and determine that in order to move forward. So my performance is very visible through the tools, and you have access to those. And as a result, I can't hide, I can't bluff. There it is. Performance is measured from a number of equations from my perspective. Quantity of fleet. Can we reduce your physical number of vehicles on the road? Can we reduce your physical stock positions? Because that's cost. And if we can achieve that, we've already got the first steps. Then we need to look at the physical throughput. Are we reaching your customer based on your customer demand? And again, that's measurable. And that was the performance tools that I'm talking about. So these would be the metrics that we're putting into play. Now, again, I'll happily come and share the cost saving with you as part of a dual benefit.
Anyone else?
some members of the audience thinking this is a good piece, looks like a good tool, and indeed your answer has been very clear, very transparent. Is there a kind of optimum size of fleet where your particular service is especially relevant?
I operate the tools from as many or as few as 5 vehicles up to fleets of specific customers of 120 vehicles. So the range and capacity is there. The tool itself is built on a SaaS model, so it serves as a software as a service solution, which means that for the number of vehicles you simply pay on a monthly basis like you would for a telematics solution. Okay. Thank you.